So we're going to go ahead and reward your promptness by getting started on our next presentation. So the next one is another case study. Ninewood is another CMG client, and Craig Jolly actually has kind of done a tour of duty in the CMG ecosystem in Oregon. He was previously with Oregon Freeze-Dried, which was one of our first clients, and then found his way over to Ninewood. So Craig is going to be presenting here along with Ben Pottorff. Did I say that correctly? Ben Pottorff, the Ninewood case study. So over to you.
All right. Thank you, Eric. Thanks, everybody. My name is Craig Jolly. I'm the operations manager at Ninewood. So I am responsible for production, scheduling, process engineering. Ben Pottorff is our scheduling manager. I'm going to talk kind of an overview about our operating model and some of the market innovations we've done due to the ability we now have with DBR Plus. And Ben's going to give you kind of behind the scenes. He's really the guy at the wheel, how the whole system works. And we titled our presentation, Calmness in the Midst of Uncertainty. Our market is custom suspended wood ceilings. Ninewood is the only manufacturer in the United States that focuses exclusively on suspended wood ceilings and walls. If you look around the room here, there's an example of a wood wall. These are some of the pictures that we've done. This is not a Ninewood product here. If you look really closely, there's lots of defects that just jump right out at us, but most people would not see. This is really ugly. No offense to the hotel. So most of our products you will see in things like restaurants, hotel lobbies, auditoriums, corporate offices, civic centers. This is a library in Alaska. Courtrooms, things like that, and lots of schools and universities. And this example right here is what this is supposed to look like if it's done well. Our market is construction, specifically specialty construction, and that has some unique characteristics to it. We sell to subcontractors who are the people that would install this. They're the ones that buy our product, but our real customer is architects. We try to get our product specified when an architect is designing a building. So they will write a specification that says, I want this ceiling to look this way, and I want it to be this product, and I want it to come from this company. So we are out there with architects trying to get into their specification. And by design, architects are trying to do something unique. That's what makes them an architect, right? So they are always looking for something different, some different shape, space, color, angle, size, attachment method, whatever. No building is the same. No two rooms in the same building are the same. So there's always lots of variety. And everybody wants their product to look a little bit different in one way or another. By nature, construction is uncertain. I'm sure if any of you guys have ever had contractor work on your home, can you tell me 4 weeks from now what day you're going to be here to do this and how long it's going to take? What kind of answer do you think you'd get? Not very certain, right? So that's just kind of a given in construction. There's uncertainty there. There's lots of Murphy going on, lots of moving parts, lots of things outside people's control, and as a result, nobody really knows what the schedule is. Because we are on the specialty side, there's also long lead times involved. We are making things that we have to go get from our suppliers. They're not things that we hold in stock. So if you put all of those things together, the kind of natural conclusion is low on-time performance. That's very common. 50, 60% is probably doing very well if you can be even within a few days of when you promise to do something. So for us, that leaves a real opportunity for us to make a difference and come in and do something that nobody else can do, which is reliability. And that fits very well with the whole model of DBR Plus and predictability. We define reliability as delivering the design intent correctly and on time. And here's what our on time in full has been if you go back the last 4 or 5 years. So I mentioned 50 to 60% is probably normal for the industry. We've been at the high 80s, low 90s, been some ups and downs as our company's evolved and grown. With the notable exception of this period in the middle of last year, we're going to talk about that a little bit in my next couple slides, and then Ben's going to allude to that. There were some specific contributing factors that happened there, but overall, that's very good. That alone is enough to stand out in our industry as something that nobody else can even approach doing. And DBR Plus is a big part of that. Romac gets the award for the longest implementation of DBR Plus. I think we get the award for the oldest single software instance of DBR Plus. We are still using version 1.28. But by the end of this month, we will be upgraded. We've done a lot of testing. We're getting ready to migrate. But there's some specific reasons why we are on that version that we are.
But you've got the updated logo, which I really appreciate.
I know, I pulled that right off your website.
I did not have that.
Was that nice?
You did. That's great.
We have no ERP system whatsoever. We use Excel. It's one of the most common ERP systems you'll find out there in the world, but we don't really have inventory. We don't have part numbers. We don't have bills of materials. DBR Plus, as a tribute to the software, has been stable for 10 years. We've used that and relied on that all day, every day for that period of time, and it's really our source of record. It tells us what we did, when we did it, when we shipped. So if we need to go back and find out what our on-time shipment was in March of 2011, we'll go into DBR Plus database and pull that data out. So as a result, it became totally integrated in all of our reports. All systems are tied to DBR Plus. It's almost like the ERP of our company. And it became very hard to untangle that. So as new versions came along, it wasn't really worth upgrading. And then that went again, and then it went again. And soon enough, we're 10 years down the road, and we've never upgraded. So now we're in the process of doing that, and it's going to be great when we're done. Our business is about 15% engineer to order. So for us, that means something that we have never done before. It might be in a new species, it might be in a new shape, it might be in a new material, a new attachment method, a new angles or curves or something along those lines. We are 85% make to order. So that 85% is some combination or reconfiguration of something we've already done before. Just mixing and matching different color species, things that we know how to do, but as I said before, the architects don't want it to be the same, so they want some different combination to make it different. And that doesn't leave very much left over for make to stock. So from a demand-driven standpoint, 100% demand-driven, which is good news, but it's also bad news. There's some definite challenges as a result of that. As you might imagine, if you're 100% demand-driven, now you're living with demand variation, right? So this is a picture of our volume over the last 3 or 4 years. This is monthly volume, and I left the scale off here, but you can see it's plus or minus 30% volume is very common from month to month. And you'll even find periods where we might be up or down 100%, double or half of the previous month. So a lot of swings. We've had periods in the past where we were fairly flat. And what we were doing there is we were stretching our lead times. We were experimenting with a way of level loading by giving customers longer and longer lead times, which is nice and flat for us, but it's not great from a service perspective. So the customers didn't really like that. And recently we've shifted more to delivering according to their expectations, which has had the effect of increasing the volatility we deal with. So there's that period I was talking about before. We had our 2 highest months ever last year and significant volatility. So that's part of the reason why our reliability suffered during that period, but that's not all the story. Ben will get into that. On top of this, we've also increased volume. From 2017 to 2018, our volume has gone up by 30%. So high volatility and growth all happening at the same time. We're also not very automated. We have a lot of power equipment, but not a lot of automation. So we have woodworkers and craftsmen out there in the shop cutting and shaping and edging and sanding and doing those kinds of things to make these beautiful ceilings that we do. So as a result of those things, it's really difficult to minimize our total OE expense, total operating expenses. So we're not talking about material cost here. We're talking about the total amount of money the company spends, which basically comes down to the number of people that we have. How do we manage that, still provide the service level we want, and accomplish those goals? Our schedule, we have about 85 production employees. We run 2 shifts a day, about 20 hours, 4 days a week. So as you can see, we're not capacity constrained. There's no physical limitation on our system. In fact, we have a significant capacity buffer right here. Every Friday, Saturday, and Sunday is available to do makeup work. And we also have 4 hours every day between 2 a.m. and 6 a.m. that we can do catch-up work. So that makes it a lot easier to be reliable when you have that. But it makes it a little more difficult when you're talking about where's your drum and where's your constraint. So it's something that we really had to think about. So the approach we took to try to manage all that is to level load. Okay, level loading as a concept makes sense, but how do you actually do that? There's a few approaches. Well, the typical one would be build inventory. So if I'm in this low period, I build inventory that I'm eventually going to sell in one of these peak periods, right? But we already explained how engineer to order and make to order doesn't really lend itself to that. The next option we experimented with in the past, which is extend lead times. So I will just staff myself for somewhere in between here, and as I get full, my lead times get longer. That's not very good from a customer service perspective. So the next best option is to be faster. So we needed to find a way, if our customers are the coyote and we are the roadrunner, how can we create time in our schedule by doing things faster than our competition and faster than our customers ultimately need? So that's the option we've chosen. Just being faster is an enabler, but that doesn't solve the problem completely. Now you have to decouple. So we've taken our operation, and this is an innovation that we've just done in the last 6 months to a year, and we actually split it into 2 parts. And we put a buffer in between there that we call our production buffer. I use both symbols for time buffer and stock buffer, and I don't know if Chad will agree with this or not, but it's not technically a stock buffer because it's not independent of demand. It's not something that we could ship to any customer order. These are orders that we've pulled ahead and processed at this portion of the plant, and then they sit and wait to go through this portion, but they're for a specific customer order. I cannot change who they would go to. So we buy ourselves a little bit of time there, and sometimes we can pull work ahead. If we're lower on one side, we can do more here and vice versa. So it gives us a little bit of flexibility. And so that's the kind of approach we've taken to minimize that total OE spend. The second piece of that is now you got to have flexibility, and some people have alluded to that before. Our staffing level is split to about 2/3 on this side of the plant and about 1/3 on that side. And in order to be able to really level load, those people have to be very fluid and dynamic. So they have to be able to move back and forth. We're actually starting to experiment with a concept called skills buffers, which came from Caroline. What's Caroline's last name? Mondon, right, that we learned about when we were in Frankfurt last October. So there's actually a different type of buffer that tells you what skill level you have, where your skill level weaknesses are, where you need to put your training into so that you can accomplish this flexibility and ultimately minimize OE, but still achieve the service level. So the service level metric is the highest level metric that we accomplish. Everything else comes after that. Our lead times, so in the specialty industry, you don't actually start making something until you have a signed contract with a subcontractor that wants to buy something from you. So that's the first point where they will say, this is exactly what I want to buy, this is how much, this is what color, this is what species. So at that point, we have to quote a lead time for them, and we're typically in the range of 8 to 10 weeks. That's pretty common for our industry, and so that's been good enough. Of those 8 to 10 weeks, 5 to 6 weeks is getting the materials. The next 2 to 4 weeks is getting production scheduled. So that decoupling opportunity that I talked about is not huge. If you take the best case here, 5 weeks for materials and 2 weeks for production, you're talking about maybe a 1 to 2 week time buffer that you can use. So it's something, but it's not gigantic. So that's the way the operating model works. I'm an operations guy. I worked, as Eric mentioned, 25 years at Oregon Freeze Dry, all on the production, planning, scheduling, engineering side. I started at Ninewood in 2015, and 6 months after I started, our sales manager decided he was going to leave the company, and they needed somebody to fill that role. So I got chosen for that, and I thought, well, I've never done sales before, so that'd be a good experience for me. I can learn something new. So I had to start there and begin asking a lot of questions. I had no experience whatsoever. And what I found was that 8 to 10 weeks was really ingrained in all of our systems. We could offer literally nothing faster than 8 to 10 weeks. We had no options for doing better than that. And that was actually a really big problem because as I talked to customers and I talked to our salespeople, they were telling me over and over, we lose way too many projects due to lead time. So there's an opportunity there. We know we can capture more business. We know we are losing it now, but we've got to figure out a way to get faster. And so the timing worked out great because that's really an operations problem, right? Operations provides the solution to that. So that was a great fit. As it turns out, many of our finished products come from only a few common raw materials. If you're familiar with the lumber industry, lumber mills don't make a lot of variety, right? They make a lot of product, but it's usually 2x4s, 2x6s, maybe various lengths. But much of what we do comes from those materials. As it turns out, 2 different sizes of material in various lengths and 4 different types of sheet goods can make many, many finished products for us. So that creates an opportunity for stock buffers. So with stock buffers, then we could turn our raw material lead time from 5 to 6 weeks down to as little as 1 week. And the great part about that was our vendors were willing to hold the inventory for us. So they would hold the raw lumber. We would give them 1 week's notice because we knew we had it here. They would mold it into the specific size we have and deliver to our shop. I should mention we're located in Springfield, Oregon, which is about 2 hours south of Portland, a few hours south of the stem cell guys. So we're in the middle of forest. There's lots of lumber mills all around. There's lots of wood processing capability. Roseburg Forest Products is right down the road. They have a wood ceiling in their corporate office, which is beautiful. So that was great. But having the material is not enough. We also heard several times already today, you got to have the capacity as well. So part of the reason for that 2 to 4 weeks was because even though we can almost always make stuff in 2 weeks, sometimes we're full, and we don't have room to just drop something in without disrupting the whole rest of the schedule. So we started reserving capacity, and we literally experimented with different ways in DBR Plus of doing this, putting dummy orders in to reserve or just scheduling a little bit below our drum target level to leave room for that. And as these orders dropped in, we had capacity for them, we had materials. So now we could offer a 3-week lead time to the market, which was 60 to 70% faster than what anybody else could do. So that was a big innovation for us. So in 2016, we rolled out what's called the 9-Wood Fast Track program. This is our group of products, our simplest but our most popular. And to the customer, it looks like it's very custom, but for us, it's very easy. So the things that flow through our shop the fastest, the things we make all the time, the things that are pretty easy to us. And then we started to grow this program. In 2017, we began expanding our SKUs. We're up to hundreds of combinations now, but we did not add a single stock buffer to that. We found other things that we could make out of the same raw materials that we were already holding, which meant our vendors maybe would hold a little bit more, but mostly it meant that they were turning faster. And so we were getting more and more benefit from the inventory that our suppliers were holding for us. And in 2018, we really doubled down here. We created something called the On-Time Shipment Guarantee. This is a vision that our founder had from many, many years ago. I think he probably took a Jonah class from Chad. And he wanted to offer a guarantee in the construction industry, first of its kind, nobody can do it. And it would be something completely different. So it builds on our reliability that we already have, builds on the capabilities of DBR Plus to promise and deliver on time. And as a result of that, now we also made it very simple. So the premise of the guarantee is we will refund 5% of the shipment's value back to the customer automatically for every business day late. So if it's scheduled to ship on a Thursday, actually ships on a Friday, we'll invoice you for 95% of the shipment and credit that back. So that's been a real success. So over time, over these years now, it's been starting to be recognized as a pretty high value add. We're doing something that nobody else can do. We're backing it up with a guarantee, which means people can believe it. And even though it is our most simple and basic products, we're actually starting to be able to charge more for this. So an additional benefit. Fast Track program has grown over time. So this shows Fast Track volume as a percentage of our total volume. You can see back in 16 it was about 5%, then went to a little over 10. 2018 it was almost 20%. Now we're really close to that 20% so far this year. And that was all during a time period where we were also growing. So as the market overall was growing for us, the percentage of Fast Track was growing as well. And then the guarantee is what we implemented back in late 17. So we announced it internally in in November. We said we're going to roll this out next spring at our big annual convention. Let's start practicing for it, right? So we did that in March of 18, and you can see what the growth has been like since then. So very successful. I don't know if you can read the color for that, but its on-time percentage has been 98.5%. So we've shipped over 350 projects since we announced the guarantee. Only 5 of those have been late, which is talking about the tails. That gives you very good information to then go back and figure out why those were late, right? We had a few quality issues. We had one where we had the order ready to go. The truck just didn't show up, and they couldn't get here for whatever reason. So we ate that one. That was a late. So one of them was a typo error, right? We just had the wrong date in our date field, and we ended up shipping it one day late because of that. So those obviously cause you to go back and fix the problems that are causing that to happen. So, okay, that's kind of the overview of how we've done things. Ben's going to talk about the specifics of how our model works.
Greg? My name is Ben Podor. I'm the scheduling manager at 9-Wood. My team and we take all of the orders from project management and we process them into DBR Plus work orders, and then working in conjunction with supply chain and our information like production workbook teams deliver things to the floor and set those ship dates for our customers. When anyone asks me out on the floor what it is I actually do, because they'll see me wandering around from time to time seeing how things go, I typically just tell them that everything you see out here is my fault. So literally everything I put out in the system, right, I'm the one that turned the key and pressed the button, and all of the work that I have 95 people doing is a direct result of something I put into the system. Since our inception in 2004, we hand applied all of our finishes. So every single thing that ran through the shop had to be spray applied by hand. This was what we picked as our constraint as a drum for DBR Plus, and it was what everything ran through. So we'd have 6 people working inside the drum, and they would be kind of doing what they called the dance. So 2 people would be spraying, 2 people would be picking up things and putting them onto the tables, and 2 other people would be staging materials, and they'd have to rotate around and put them on these drying racks. Honestly, it was a mess. 4 to 12-hour dry times for all of our finishes because they're all just air drying in the shop, as well as the fact that you just have racks upon racks upon racks out in the shop that are drying. And then you have the giant queue of materials, all these pallets, the sea of pallets of materials waiting in small batch sizes because they couldn't physically run that much. So we had to change something. We tried to maximize as much as we could going through, so we have like grill type products, like something like this wall. You'd have to spray with a stain. You have to spray it 4 times, right? Just flip it over, spray it on one side, let it dry, flip it over, spray it again, and keep doing that 4 times. So we would put these temporary supports on the back to try to maximize shorten the amount of times it had to run through the drum. That was great for the drum, but it was horrible for everyone else. So if you look at, this is our shop, and if you look at this is the order that which things would go through, and we'd have this cyclical just disaster because it would have to go to the finish booth after it had those temporary supports put on. Then they have to be taken off so we can sand them. Then they get put back on so we can go finish it some more, and then take them off so we can. It was horrible. It caused this absolute maelstrom of confusion where everyone is attacking everyone else's, right? Buffer boards don't function in this case because you get the first pass, right? DBR Plus allows you the buffer board with the first time. The second and third time, it doesn't get it. So it's not even visible from a buffer board standpoint, and it was really, really frustrating. So we had to fix something, and we really took a look at our finishing system, and so we switched to a finish line, a flat lay finishing system with a forced stride attachment. So this reduced our lead times for the actual dry time of the product from 12 hours to 15 minutes. So as soon as it came out the back end, it's essentially stackable, and we can send it back for multiple passes. This was installed in mid-2018, so this is the reason for that dip that you saw in some of our reliability, because we had 2 functional drums that were doing the same processing as we were trying to rapidly convert all of our finishes over from the coatings booth over to the Mito. And this changed a lot about how we work as a team, but it came at a cost. It's 240 feet long. We're not that big of a shop, 60,000 square feet. We built our own wall and we paid for it. It's just crazy. Like, we had to figure out where to align materials and where to place things and what to do with that. And so, but it had a benefit. We were able to use, if you remember the table, there was 4 pieces of material on that at a time. And it had to be picked up and transferred over and over and over again. It'd take about 30 seconds to get the next batch in and through. We're able to roll out multiple pieces, right? You can see the density of the belt and the difference that it caused, and the fact that it's forced stride means that we can move it. Some of you know Larry Von Deelen. He worked at Oregon Freeze Dry with Craig, and he's helping us out with finances and some of our operations and different things. And when the Mito was being installed, he sat me and the supply chain manager and my boss at the time down and said, we need to take a look at flow. We need to look at the concept of flow across the whole organization, how we move things through the shop. This is changing how we process things, and the shop is a mess. He's going to hate this picture. I love this picture because this is Larry just being Larry and pointing out that we have to pay attention to these things. And so we're talking about a complete reorganization of the shop. And one of the things that he told me that really stuck with me is that you have to pay attention to flow before it becomes a real problem. That was very true for us. In the midst of the shift, not only did we have 2 drums, but we were trying to figure out what this meant for a complete reorganization of everything. So I'm a visual person, and so I have to kind of work things out mechanically. So this is the way that I explained how we needed to reorganize the shop, and it was affectionately called the burger plan, right? Special sauce, lettuce, pickles, cheese on a sesame seed bun, right? So, but it was looking at the different groups and things that were moving through the shop, how our products move, and how we could structurally reorganize both the supervisory and staffing and the physical locations of those things. So this was the largest reorganization of supervision in Ninewood history. We normally had supervisors that, they might do various things all over the shop, but they're not really focused on any one group. And so looking at the plant and looking at the reorganization, we physically moved a bunch of work centers, we moved everything else. And so the linear change, if you remember the last one, this is now the new way that it moved through. And there's two colors for a very specific reason I'll get to in a minute, but you can see the fact that it comes in receiving, it goes through and out to shipping with very little turn time, very little cyclical, like those vicious cycles, and we really tried to make things come to a place and never come back. You get processed and just leave. Thank you for your time. That would be great. I wanted to focus on this area here. So that's the Mito, right? So you can imagine this is our entire shop, and this is the monster in the middle that has to be accounted for. So what we did is we realized, well, now that we have a force-drying capability, we can just run the entire cycle all at once, rather than having it get stained and wait, and sealed and wait, and then go sanded and wait, and then final top coat. We just included that all in one work center. So this is entire process, the entire pass. It can run through here 6 times, including this brush deck right here is a sanding process, a scuff process in between a seal and a top coat for that final nice smooth finish. And so we treat this as one work center in DBR Plus, and they just run the entire thing. So that as soon as it comes in, is sanded, ready to coat materials. And then it comes out as completely top-coated, finished goods, ready to move on. It never has to come back. That was huge for us. One of the things I struggle with as a scheduler was, one, the buffer board's not working, but also just the multi-pass problem, right? When something comes into your drum, it then has to go somewhere else and come back. Now you've caused all of these groups to not know what's most important. If you get in backlog, your dispatch lists, they're dead. No one knows what to focus on because there's really no actual intent or clarity. There's just no visibility about what's the most important, and it causes this really just generic mess. And so it was a big problem for us. Once we got through that, we wanted to take a look at the top zone. Craig talked about the decoupling of our group, and we realized that all of the things on the top half of the bun here are processes that can happen without any real, like we have an approval from a customer, so we have an order for them already, but we can move it through to a certain point as soon as materials arrive. We usually would wait until we had everything, material and information, fully signed off, nice little clean package for everyone, and then only then would we process things. So we actually took a look at it, and we said we can run this group as soon as material arrives, and we can verify material and have it set and ready and waiting for everyone else. Now, at this point in time, Craig was introducing me to the DDMRP concept, and so he told me about these little guys. I'm sure you've seen them all, right? Capacity, stock, and time. So what he asked me to do is he asked me to redraw our entire plant layout based on these principles. So I took our feeder zone, that first group, and I redrew it, right? So we have veneer QI and solid wood QI, which is incoming wood from our vendors, right? They go into 2 different processes, components for veneer, which has plenty of capacity. It doesn't have to be managed as a drum. But our cut and grade group does, because it's slower. Solid wood is just a slower process to check that everything's clean and ready to go, and it's got to get cut to length, cut all the defect out. So we treated that as a drum and then move it through everything else, and it ends at its completion buffer. We treat these as a child work order, right? So we call them sub-work orders at Ninewood, but this is essentially a separate thing from everything else going on with that project. It then goes into what Craig was talking about as our production buffer. Now, we've argued back and forth about whether or not it's a time or a stock buffer, all those kinds of things. I chose it as a stock buffer just because that made sense to me. It's physical materials waiting in a location, but we'll continue arguing that on a plane, I'm sure. But so this point allows us to move through the process as far as we could, have verified materials, and we have our information team line up with the same thing. So now we have materials and information ready to go, and we can treat material in this buffer as ready to release. I now have the ability, if I have a hole in the drum for primary production to release it whenever I want. I can start it early, or I can just let it sit at its point where it would normally be for our customer. So now we take a look at the rest of the group. There's a production buffer over there on the left, so that starts everything. And then we move through the rest of our processes, right? So right there, the finishing, that is that's the MEDO, the finishing line. And it runs through everything else. We have a couple different control points where we just verify materials. Basically, Feeder QI counts materials in. They're like a kitting resource. And then Drum QI verifies that all of the finishing is good and ready to go before it can pass on to the rest of our group. And then it's assembled and packaged and out the door. The four-strine capability also gave us the ability to have some direct package products. So we have certain things that come off of the MEDO and can literally go right into a crate, which is something we were never able to do before. So in some cases, a product that would take us a week to a week and a half to produce, we could literally do in a day because we could sand it, finish it, and put it in a box the exact same day. So an entire production run of looking at everything together, that's the entire run. There's a production buffer nestled right in the middle there. And so it really gave us a decouple point where we could look and say, hey, this makes a whole lot of sense. We actually know what's going on in here, and we're able to verify at that point that that our primary drum, the finishing booth is going to be, or the MEDO, is going to be ready and able to process those parts on time. Chad talked about shocks. In February of this year, we experienced the most snow we've experienced since 1969. We're not snow people. I'm sure in Illinois you guys probably get some snow, but we are like 450 feet off of sea level, right on the valley floor. We get 1 to 2 inches a year. That's it. We got 18 inches in 2 days. And so that was a bit of a problem. It was so much of a problem that the locals who cannot drive in snow, we called it Snowmageddon. It was horrible. It was a massive shutdown. Everyone had power outages, and the main problem was that no one could get to work. On top of that, at the exact same time, I got jury duty. So I got to spend a whole week in the basement of the Lane County Courthouse with this lovely 30-year-old wood ceiling and just sit there, phone off, can't talk to anyone, can't answer any questions. I'm out of pocket. If I'm not at jury duty, I'm stuck at home with no ability to even contact the plant because the power was out. This caused us some major issues. At least so we thought. But one of the things that was so surprising as a result was just the clarity that we experienced throughout this process. So we had one completely canceled day. Shop was completely closed. Power was out. The next 2 days, we only had 50% of our whole staff. They just couldn't get there. We had one guy who had 100 trees between him and our shop. So what were we going to do? We were going to be absolutely stuck with a potential of having a significant amount of late orders, right? We ship about 30 projects a week, 20 to 30 projects a week, and this is a big deal for us. So we want to be on time. We want that reliability. So we had fast and confident decisions based on the buffer boards actually functioning, right? They were able to use their buffer boards and through clear and relevant information know what to do quickly, and they had very clear priorities as a result. No one was questioning the plan. It was like, here's the ones that didn't get done yesterday because literally no one was here, so we shifted our entire production schedule by 1 day, and that ultimately resulted in only 5 late orders for us. Actually, it would have been 4, but the FedEx truck literally couldn't get there in time because they were stuck in the snow. So we felt pretty good about that. That was one of those things that was like, okay, this is making sense. The principles are making sense. We get it, and we're starting to see some results. Some lessons learned. So focusing on flow creates a way to make decisions. With a buffer board that's functioning, this is a snapshot from just last week, you can see that we have control over what's going on. I know exactly which work orders the drum buffer manager is going to come talk to me about or is expecting to see in his queue very soon. And I know that, hey, a decent amount of things are working their way through the system. I should be seeing those really soon. The other thing was, because of better visibility, I have better expedite options as a scheduler. I can take work and I can process requests from project management due to understanding what's going on inside our systems. This is a snapshot of our buffering system, or of our drum, and you can see that I've got a significant amount of capacity next week. I'm planning on using that for fast tracks, and so I know that when someone comes to me, we have a certain number of reservations we allow in a week for our fast track program, and so if they say, hey, can we go over, all I have to do with them is say, go talk to supply chain, get a clean yes from them, and it's a yes from me. Because I know I've got control, I'll be able to implement those quickly, and I won't have any questions as a result. Our schedule is a little different because of our old and busted system we're trying to replace is ancient. Thank you for calling it that, Deborah. But I'll try to speak in the new version. So, like, let's say we had 1,000 square feet of something and 100 square feet are damaged somewhere in the process. We would unrelease that work order. We would split it into 900 and 100, right? And then we would allow, using alternate routings, we would send the 900 on through the rest of its processes based on wherever it got stopped. Those would move on. And then the 100, we would put a alternate routing in that goes back to where it needs to go, and then those would run through like that. And we would run them through as an expedite, drop buffer, or whatever we need to do to try to catch them up. If we can't catch it up, it's a full retrofit. Like we have to reorder materials. It's going to be 2 weeks or whatever. We would still split it, but then I would just reschedule that secondary order as an expedite once it shows up with new material.
We use this control point right here to catch those at that point in the process with enough time in our shipping buffer that we can react to almost every instance. One of those fast track projects that was late had to be redone completely from scratch, all the way back to the beginning, and we still were only 1 day late. So the system was able to recover pretty quickly. But you got to catch it as early as possible. You can't catch it at packaging. You got to catch it enough time, so you have time to react.
Splits and alternate routings are the way that I manage that, so I can see it. Because the one thing I want is everyone to be able to see it. So.
Okay, thanks so much, guys. Great job.
Thank you.
Awesome.